Lovely. Okay, and without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Lucinda Green, who needs no introduction. And also, I have my notes here. We've got Louise Bates, who is a trained Nui Schuller, and I thought it was Nuschel, but it's Nui Schuller. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Louise. So she's a trained Nui Schuller bitting expert, also Lantra certified in bitting and bridle fitting. She's also a BHS coach, which is really very, brilliant if you're going to be a bitter, so you can get the other side of the coin. She's a dressage queen. We'll forgive you that, Louise, as we are all cross-country riders. So I'm not. There's very few dressage queens that we allow into this group, and also you've shown at county level. So she's a really, really experienced horsewoman. I'm gonna let in or ask Lottie. How do I let Lucinda in?
She just needs to press start video.
Lucinda, you need to press start video. And here she is. She needs no introduction. Lucinda Green, world champion, Olympic champion, 6 times badminton champion. I know I don't need to tell all of you that. And just the most amazing lady and one of my bestest friends now. I still cannot believe, after all those years of me idolizing you, that we're really, really good friends. I'm so lucky. Anyways, I'm gonna let you guys, I'm gonna zip it and let you take over, and I'm going to go blank. And actually, just to say, as I told all of you, there's no order in these things. Louise, you just need to tell me when you want me to pull up the videos and the pictures. Okay?
Right. Okay.
So have fun, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Golly, good evening all. And Louise, hugest appreciation that you've come on this, because this all stemmed from a clinic I did in not far from you near Hull, and had a really good horse and a really good rider, and I couldn't make head or tail of them. And I just knew that the bitting was the main reason why I couldn't make head or tail of them, and sent them off to find you. And then we had a long chat, and I realized how intriguing you are and how much knowledge you have. Now, bidding is such an interesting area because there are some rules, but there are very few rules. And what I wanted to ask you to start with is, if you get asked to go and see a horse who's just not accepting his bit and throwing his head all over the place and stopping himself seeing his fences because of it, what do you do? What's your sort of first, do you watch it go and see where the problem is, or how do you go about it?
The first thing I do is to get a full background of the horse and rider, partnership, the history of the horse, any injuries or medical problems, anything really. Just try and find out as much as I can. I then do an assessment of the head, the mouth. Quite often you might find that there's been some trauma in the mouth. You name it, I've found it. Bone fragments, tooth fragments, soft tissue damage, the position, just even the position of extra skin. There's been some trauma to the skin, and that can make a massive difference to what mouthpiece you would use, just from a shape point of view, to try and ease the problem, even before you start thinking about performance or anything else. So it's just finding out if there is something that is actually causing the problem, or if it is a sensitivity issue. Then we would look at the bit and bridle fit, and then you conduct a ridden assessment. And it's at that point, if you've not found anything on the head and mouth assessment, you're looking at the pressure from the existing bit, where that's applying the pressure, what the horse is comfortable. My job is all about pressure points and using the pressure points that the horse copes with, and the pressure that it is just too much. And that's basically what you're trying to do, is utilize those pressure points, A, to make the horse comfortable, and to get the performance and the safety that you want.
And you mentioned earlier that sometimes you don't just look in the mouth, you actually, the saddle fitting can have an effect on how the horse accepts his bit.
It's absolutely everything, Lucinda. I mean, I look at, as well, I find problems with the jaw. So that may stem from a dental issue, that you may have problems with the TMJ, with the poll. Then you would work, I mean, particularly saddles do make a big difference. We'll talk a little bit later about tongues and how they work, but quite often if I see a tongue issue, it's either sensitivity from the bit or it can stem from the saddle. So the saddle quite often shows through the tongue. And that was quite an eye-opener when I first realised that, and caught on to that.
What sort of thing in the saddle connects to the tongue?
Absolutely.
What sort of thing in the saddle? Is it a pinching saddle? Is it?
Yeah, anything that's causing discomfort. Yeah, so if the saddle, predominantly you see the saddles that are a little bit too tight or the balance isn't right. So, you know, anything there that's causing discomfort, that's where you're going to see it. And that's a big red flag for me. So if I can't find anything on the assessment of the head and you've got the tongue, that's where I would be looking at next. But it is an examination of everything. I'm looking at absolutely everything. So, you know, I think it can be a bit of an underestimation when you say you're a bit fitter, because it's not just about putting a bit in a horse's mouth.
Are you also looking at the shape of the roof of the mouth?
Every part of the anatomy. I think sometimes people can get a little bit misled when people think that horses having a fleshy mouth can be quite a big problem. So I hear that from a lot of people. My horse has got a big tongue or a fleshy mouth. Quite often the fleshiness can work to absorb the pressure, so can provide a cushioning. So if the horse has got fleshy lips, membrane, which is a skin inside the mouth, if there's a lot of loose membrane, loose skin, that can cause a little bit of an issue with trapping of the, depending on the lozenge or mouthpiece that you're using. The palate, so the roof of the mouth, yes, that does make a difference, because that does reduce the amount of room that you've got in the mouth, and that does impact as the horse ages as well. So as the horse gets older, the shape of the mouth changes, and so you do lose the amount of room that you've got in the mouth to play with. And again, a little bit of a misnomer as well, most mouthpieces will rotate forward into the mouth, not necessarily up into the palate, whereas people will worry about engaging the palate. The pressure usually works in a downward direction through the tongue into the bars of the horse's mouth, which that is generally where the sensitivity most of the time is experienced.
Very interesting what you say about fleshy lips. I was in New Zealand this time last year. Can you remember that?
Oh, crikey.
There was somebody, a vet, who was holding a clinic for me, a really good girl, and she had somebody who had decided to cut the fleshiness out of their horse's mouth, an operation. And I didn't, it wasn't happening then, but I asked her later whether it had really worked or not. And they said, you know, still in progress, not sure. Have you ever seen that or had that?
I haven't.
Yeah.
I haven't. I mean, I dread to think of the actual scar tissue then that you're going to, you know, deal with. I have seen horses that have had tumours. I've seen horses that have fractured jaws and had terrific injuries and do cope incredibly well. I think fleshiness issues that I have found are injuries in the folds of the fleshiness. And again, that's where you get the challenge of the mouthpiece and where the pressure of the mouthpiece is being placed, and the pressure of the skin being pushed against the teeth as well. So there's so many aspects involved, you know. Yeah. It's if I could wave a magic wand and say, you know, it's so complex when you're looking at at things.
It's fascinating, and it's so lovely that we come a little bit from different ends of the scale, because this is your profession. Mine is to try and help people enjoy their cross country and get the best out of themselves and their horses. So I'll see maybe 20-30% of horses who I know hate the bit they're in. They're very often in a 3-ring bit, 1, 2, 3, and out of, I would say, 35 years of teaching, I reckon that out of every 10 horses that come in a 3-ring bit, 9 hate it and 1 loves it. And I've learned over time to be leave it if it's fine, but if it isn't fine, and it can be quite difficult, so people have learned to rely on their bits and they don't like it. But I sort of have and I want to ask you about this. I have okay, that horse is not liking his bit. He's not particularly sensitive. He's normal. I'm going to pop in a Waterford, which is that sort of wobbly bicycle chain thing, which I know you know, Louise. And then if I feel he's terribly sensitive, I'll probably pop in a leather straight bar bendy leather bit, and then I go from there. And sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't. But very soon I'm out of options. I have got a lot of bits in my bag, and we go through them, but very soon I'm out of options, and then I have to say I admit defeat, but I really don't think your horse is happy. It may be something like what you've been describing, something that needs attention, or it may just be the type of bit, because I do believe there is a bit for every horse out there, but it is sometimes just the finding of it, and it is very difficult. But tell me why these 3-ring bits, why you nodded your head when I said I have 9 out of 10 horses I see in them hate them. Why do you feel that is?
I predominantly see them without the use of a backstrap. So generally, if you don't use a backstrap with them and use them, the lower you use the rein, the more pressure you're actually putting into the corners of the mouth. There's an awful lot of pressure up into the corners, then onto the poll. So you're really utilising those 2 pressure points. So what I would do to reduce the amount of pressure into the corners of the mouth, I would then possibly use, if you weren't changing the mouthpiece, because it depends what the mouthpiece is. If it's a single joint, I don't tend to use a single joint very often. But I would try a back strap first, or a curb strap, as some people, they have different names. But and what that does, how you fit that then is very important. You wouldn't want to fit it too tight. If it's too tight, it will have the opposite effect of what you want. But basically you're adding another pressure point. So you're sharing the pressure, so it's not just into the corners of the mouth and the poll, but adding a little bit of pressure through the back of the jaw can make a big difference. But very much not just being about the cheeks, but being about the mouthpiece that you're using as well.
And without most of the ones I see don't have a backstrap, and most of the horses I've ridden in the 3-ring and had 1 or 2 hideous experiences with it haven't had a backstrap either. What is it actually doing? Why will a horse often go in a gag, a Cheltenham gag, the rope through the ring, and not go in a 3-ring? What's the difference?
It's because as you say, with the Cheltenham gag, again, you've got an awful lot of pressure, but there's a quicker release. So with the Cheltenham gag, with the rope that you've got a quicker release when you change. So if you ease the rein contact a little bit, you've got a much quicker release of the pressure. But through the 3-ring gag, it isn't the same, but quite often they come with a French link mouthpiece or with a single joint mouthpiece, which again are quite high pressure mouthpieces. I mean, I would say still the Cheltenham gag, they're, equally there. They tend to be your single joint or the French link as well. But again, that's it. It's a very much, every horse is so different, and their responses are so different. But I do think that the running gag, that quicker release and the more adjustability of your pressure does make a difference.
It was interesting because I've always been interested that I always thought gags were pole pressure, and then, or rather, 3 rings were pole pressure, but then so is a gag. So why does the horse go in a gag, doesn't go in a 3 ring? And then somebody said to me in one country or other, but that's what I love about traveling and teaching. I learn so much from other people.
Yeah.
Somebody said, oh, a 3 ring, when you put pressure on it, it rolls the bit into the tongue. And I thought, because I've not got a camera to watch inside the mouth, but that makes a lot of sense as to why a horse will go in a gag, but very often won't go in a 3 ring. He doesn't always go in a gag either. And there is something other than pole pressure, isn't there? There is that sort of...
Yeah, there is. Generally, the mouthpiece rotates 45 degrees under rein contact.
What,
so
the 3 ring?
Yeah.
That's quite a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot.
Experience, I must just quickly tell you, and it's long before this that I had my awareness that 3 ring bits were not liked by a lot of horses. I was sent off hunting with a large middleweight horse, beautiful horse in Yorkshire, and I was meant to be doing an article for the Horse and Hound on the hunt, and the Adrian Dangus had come up with me, and I never did because I didn't have any control. And this horse was bearing down, pulling his head in. He was on a 3 ring, and eventually at 2 o'clock I got off and I put the reins on the snaffle instead of on the bottom ring, and it meant that I didn't have a lot of control. I had to be very hard-handed, but it meant that he carried himself in a place whereby I felt I was happy to go and jump a jump. Anyhow, when I got back home at the end of the day and thanked the lovely girl who's looking after him, I said, I'm not sure how much he really likes that 3 ring. Oh, well, he's never had it before. We just put him in it because we thought he was a little girl and he was used to a big heavy man riding him. And I went, oh, that poor horse. Basically my day was ruined because I couldn't go up with the huntsman because I didn't have any of the feel that I needed to have through my hand. Because I always say that your hand is directly linked to the horse's brain through the medium of the bit. So if the bit's wrong, your link to his brain is wrong, and I had no link to his brain. Anyhow, this isn't about me, this is about you, but I know sometimes people say they enjoy the stories, and you can imagine that.
No, definitely. People can relate to them, can't they? And I think the thing is with the 3 ring gags, the more you increase the pressure, the more likely the horse is to bear down into that pressure. So it does become a bit of a vicious cycle. I've ridden them myself and experienced the same experience myself with you think that it's going to lighten the horse and lift them a little bit, but they just, some horses they'll hollow and come away from the pressure. Others are just going to bear down and get heavier.
Well, one of the interesting things that I've found over years is that quite a lot of horses that go in a 3 ring are not thoroughbreds. Most thoroughbreds aren't really very keen on them. However, there's the exception, which that stupid phrase exception proves the rule. I don't know what that means either. But here's Jock Paget winning badminton on a beautiful little brown thoroughbred, riding it in a 3 ring bit with 1 rein on the 1 ring and 1 rein on the other rein. So the reins were uneven. And I thought, he cannot have done that by mistake. That must be done on purpose. And eventually I found him in New Zealand last year. And I said, why did you have your reins different? He said, I'm surprised you noticed it. But it just meant he just went that bit better with the reins uneven on the rings. I mean, how interesting is that? And is that a horseman or not that works out what to do? And I think that's why when we're chatting on our chats, I always say, you want me to say something as a rule. If there's ever a rule, it's that there aren't any rules.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I tell you what, Louise, I want to go, because we got a little bit of interesting footage of Lottie's horse. And I think is that a tongue problem?
It's not a tongue problem.
It isn't. Okay, it doesn't matter. We can do
it's tongue pressure. It's definitely tongue pressure. But I spoke to Rachel and Lottie about the horse because it had been getting reoccurring cuts. And they were a little bit concerned. There'd been a change in a bridle, and could it be related to that? But so I asked them, obviously I'm miles away, and I said, please send me some video. So that we've kindly got some video, which is amazing, and I think Rachel will show us some of that soon. So the first thing I said to Lottie was, what happens when Archie gets a little bit strong? Where does he put his head? Does he put his head up? Does he put his head out or down? Because that will tell me where the pressure goes when he's pulling. So, and where the pressure goes allows the cuts to happen. So if the horse's head goes out or comes up, the bit works differently. So it works across the tongue and into the corners a little bit more. So that's when you tend to get the sores developing on the lip. I think, Rachel, have you got a picture of that sore? I don't know whether she found one.
Oh, do you know what? I will get the picture. I haven't actually got Lottie. I actually have failed miserably. I've got the video. Should we start?
Yeah, that'll do. Just want to see the sort of thing.
Yeah, let's have the video on the grass. I think that'll show everybody what was happening.
Yeah. Right. Hang on. Are we sure? Have you?
Oh, we're going to take this one off now.
So this little clip of video.
Can you see that, everybody?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Can everybody see it? They can't. We can't hear them.
No,
Yeah.
they'll
Can
be able
everybody
to
see
see it
it?
if we
They're
can.
raising
Oh,
their
good.
hand.
Tracy can. Yeah, could see it.
Oh, here we
Oh.
go.
So we're just looking at what Archie does. Now, Lottie didn't go terribly fast, but it gave us an idea of what happens when she applies some pressure. And he's a bit of a feisty boy. So as she comes to slow him down, you can see coming past us is perfect, how his head comes up, he's crossing his jaw and opening his mouth. Lottie, did you loosen his noseband at that point, or was his noseband at the normal setting?
It was loosened at that point, but
Right.
he's
That was because I'd asked Lottie to loosen it, so for my benefit. So I'd asked Lottie beforehand to loosen the noseband so I could see what Archie's response was to the pressure. So that's why I'm just asking Lottie that question. Thank you, Lottie. So for me, it was showing that he's quite sensitive to bar pressure, and the fact that he was lifting his head up and opening his mouth was increasing pressure onto the bars and onto the lips and membranes of his mouth, which I should imagine when he gets a little bit more forward thinking increases this head performance. Does it, Lottie? Does he get a little bit more vigorous with his head when you're going faster?
As he gets going, because I wasn't going that quickly or anything, but if I'm galloping on cross country, that definitely is a bit more exaggerated than it is in the video.
So from my point of view, from a bit fitting point of view, I would look to try and apply the pressure in a different place. So to encourage him to lower his head under pressure rather than him lifting his head, opening his mouth and increasing the pinching. So this is, we would have had a bit of a discussion about him, but I would definitely, that's what I would do with him, is thinking about where the pressure is going. And possibly suggest changing the cheek of the bit as well, because he's got a D ring on this bit, which keeps the action of the bit very constant, so it doesn't give Archie any relief from the pressure. So changing the ring may just allow him to adjust the pressure himself a little bit more, if that helps. So
you find some horses like the constancy of a D or a cheek, others like to be able to adjust with a loose ring.
Yeah, definitely. Now, in an ideal world, I would like to look in his mouth and just see if I could find anything. But when they are very sensitive, they are either one or the other. If they're very sensitive, they like the stability, and it makes such a difference to them. But then other horses do like to have that ability to move the mouthpiece, move the pressure themselves, and then they become a little bit less dramatic about you applying an aid. So it's very much they're one way or the other. And this is where I couldn't say to somebody, right, you must put that horse in a until you've seen them working. But having seen the video of Archie, it to me, I think probably putting him in a looser ring may be an option.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I know you wanted to discuss a little bit about tongues too, which is a huge area of inconsistency really when it comes to bitting.
Yes, tongues tell us a lot really, and we did have a little bit of video of Archie in the school. He's very subtle, so he's not exaggerated, but Lottie and Rachel were saying that he does have a tendency to pop his tongue out a little bit. Now I would, if this tends to happen either side, it's a little bit more general. If the horse tends to pop the tongue to one side on a regular basis, it can be that it's trying to protect itself from some pressure. So that's where you may find something that's causing some discomfort in the mouth. Or if the tongue is just moving either side, that can just be a general discomfort. As we discussed, the tongue, because you'll either see the tongue moving around from side to side, or if the tongue draws back, or the tongue coming over the bit. This is to do with tongue pressure, bar pressure. So if the horse has got very narrow or sharp bars underneath the tongue, as the pressure is increased in the tongue, this is felt through, here we go. Now he's a wonderful boy, but you can just see very subtle him opening and closing his mouth and tongue movement. I mean, this is a super established partnership and an absolutely fabulous horse. And this is about fine tuning for him. He works really well onto the bridle, but you can just see how the mouth is just working away a little bit. And there is some tongue movement, so it's just suggesting to me, apart from the dog, that he's just not quite settled. I'd like him to be taking the contact a little bit more forward. I think we discussed that transition was a better transition there than he perhaps sometimes does have. That's a little bit better at the moment. Oh boy. So when pressure is applied, you can just see, and again, this is fine tuning, but you can just see how his mouth is just a little bit busy all the time. So for me, I would to be trying to look to improve his performance and his marks. So if you were thinking from a competition point of view, to improve his marks, you would like him to take the contact forward a little bit more, to have that little bit more of a quiet mouth. We'd like ideally the tongue to be dropped in the bottom of the mouth and to just stay there, so the lips can form a seal, so they don't breathe and swallow very well at the same time. So we'd like the lips to form a seal and the tongue to be nice and quiet if possible, in an ideal world. That may not happen when you're flying cross country though, Lucinda.
No, but I mean, what you say is wonderful, but how the heck do you achieve it with all those different shapes and different?
Absolutely. And that's what makes it not very easy. It's quite difficult to achieve. Absolutely. But you know, it's looking to just make, though, like I say with Archie, it's subtleties, because he's a super horse. You can see he's not got major bitting issues, but I think there's an improvement to be made, and obviously that would transmit. I think we've got improvements to be made for the cross country, definitely.
It interested me that you asked them to loosen his noseband, and you felt that the tighter noseband was creating more of a cut for him. Why was that?
Well, the reason I did that initially was because I didn't have the opportunity to see him. I wanted to see, with less pressure, I wanted to just see what his mouth was doing without the restriction. What I tend to find, if the noseband is too tight, you can actually make the horse be less forward thinking, have more tension, because it's not able to make an adjustment in its mouth. So if there's any discomfort with a tight noseband, you know, the horse is unable to get away from that discomfort. I'm not saying have a loose noseband and have no control. I'm just saying from my point as an assessment. And it's interesting, the horse that we discussed when I first spoke to you, that horse was a very, very tricky horse. And I've never known a horse quite like him. The more we loosened his noseband, the more he tried to push against it. It was a very strange experience. It was, I've never known a horse like it.
You almost want the security of a
yes, it was just searching for it. It was bizarre. It was bizarre. But it was certainly, that was a real learning experience for me, you know. But it does, I do quite often when I go to make an assessment, there's no point for me looking with a horse with a tight noseband because I can't see what's going on. You know, so I want to see if there's some discomfort or resistance, or so that's why I asked for Lottie to do that for me. But it was funny because they Lottie said that it did feel softer having loosened it on the flat. Yeah.
Louise, I'm just going to take you via a couple of things, and then I think we might go some questions because I see they've been coming in. I just wanted to show those of you that are watching the leather bit that I'll go to. It's bendy. This one is loose ring. I usually go to this one, which is also bendy, but you haven't got a lot of control if you decide to take off. So I have the security of the cheek, because then I can seesaw him to, I hope, some sort of a halt, which this would just go straight through his mouth. But basically, just to show you what I mean about a really soft bit, and what I have found is that a native bit, which is just as bendy, I have had the experience of a native bit burning, and I haven't been able to understand why this horse was stopping at everything, and something in my head just said, just put it in the leather, because it was already in a native, and he immediately stopping. So there must be a burning element that can come with the rubber and the plastic. And just before we go on to questions and things, I just wanted to warn those of you that go bit shopping, you do need to buy a good make, because this can happen.
It's horrifying. Absolutely horrifying.
So that, let's say, was made in somewhere that's probably got worse coronavirus than we have. And it's definitely not to be made. Now, this is a Waterford, and they are not expensive bits, Waterfords, but make sure you get a good quality one, because this one broke here and then that happened. So the bit goes, just a minute, being a bit cat-candid here, in like that, and then you have a perfectly normal bit. This actually happened in America. Luckily, it wasn't my bit, as I do luckily carry bits that are reasonably reasonably good makes. But this happened to somebody in a lesson. Equally, the first time I used the leather bit, it was made up for me by a vet who was a very good seamstress. There was no nylon webbing in the middle.
Right.
And it did chew straight through it, but luckily it was standing still when it did it.
Right.
Always these do get made for me by a wonderful vet in Salt Lake City, but there's always a nylon web running through that you hope that you've got. But just, I think I would buy bits off the internet, because there's a lot of very good stuff on the internet, but I would like to know that it's stainless steel. Wouldn't you agree? Not nickel. And I would
absolutely
a make that I've heard of. And
I think the trouble, you can buy these things on the internet, and they are named to be the same as the more expensive products, but when you buy them, the angle of the bits and the size of the lozenges are not the same, so you do not get the same action that they've been marketed at. So I would say to people, be very careful if you're buying something that's marketed as the same as a more expensive make. You're probably not getting the same action that you think you're getting.
And I think there's no such thing as a free lunch, is there, really?
Absolutely.
The other thing I found, that in the good old days when we had happy mouths, the joints between the happy mouth broken, let's say, was a lovely thick joint. And now they've in the last 10 years or so, maybe more, they've economized, and the joints are so thin between the French link happy mouth or the single link happy mouth. They're so sharp, and they must press, you correct me if I'm wrong,
Absolutely.
tongue. I'll often wrap the links of a white bit if a horse is going better in white than he is in metal.
Yeah.
Do you find that you have horses that go in different mediums? Metal,
Definitely. It's funnily, the leather, it is supposed to be, they've found that mares prefer leather. Expensive taste, but yes, so it has been found that mares do like a leather bit. So
I have to say that I would not give it a sex angle. I've had huge success with leather bits. Mares, I think, take offence easier, therefore they may go better in the leather bit, but a lot of horses just run straight through it because it isn't enough.
Yeah.
You know, you've either got a sensitive horse who you just really use your body and a little bit of hand who might accept a leather bit, or you've got one that's a bit racy and he needs a bit more. Definitely. And where are you on double bridles?
Obviously, being involved with dressage is, you know, I'm involved in double bridles, and I do fit quite a few of them, and you've got to do it very carefully. I do fit the bradoon first, and then I will fit the curb afterwards. So we tend to make sure that the horse is comfortable in the bradoon first, that you're getting the response you want, and then look at the different action of the curb to add into that. I do think sometimes I would prefer a sensitive horse to stay really happy in the snaffle that it's in, rather than try and get them to be comfortable in a double if they're really sensitive and tricky, which sometimes people tend to feel that they would like to go up to a double.
That might be in dressage.
Yeah.
They would across country.
Yes, yeah.
My mum used to say, I'm just coming to you, Rachel, in a second. She used to have a lovely expression because she just hunted probably before the war, really. And she used to say, you know, I love riding in a double bridle, because they all did in those days. And she said, yeah, riding in a snaffle is like playing the piano with gloves on. Rachel, yeah. What did you want?
Well, I was only going to say, obviously I'm the bossy one here. We have got quite a few questions.
Yeah, I think we should go for it.
Because I know we did have a few other things that we wanted to talk about, but as always, it's a never-ending subject. So should we take a few questions and then see how we get on? So we've had some people voting, and we've had 12 people vote for this question, and it's from an anonymous attendee. So I don't know who asked the question, but it was a very good one. Everyone likes it. What type of bit would you recommend if your horse leans? That's a very broad question, but
that is a very broad question. Now, I did say to Rachel earlier this evening that it is very difficult to make a recommendation without actually seeing each horse and looking, why are they leaning? You know, there's more than actually a horse leaning into the bit. Is it something that's creating a problem? Which bit would I use? There is a bit that I use, which is a Bomber DC Morgan, which is a phenomenal bit for a horse that does lean. I do sometimes use it with a back strap to help stabilize the cheeks on there. I'm a bit hesitant to recommend this to everybody without me seeing the horse, seeing the anatomy of the horse, and seeing if there is a problem that's creating the leaning. It's quite a responsibility to be a bit fitter, because you can actually lame a horse if you fit inappropriately. So I have to be very careful. But the DC Morgan is a phenomenal bit, and does actually help to develop a horse's self-carriage, but it won't suit everybody.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yes, you can.
Is there, because obviously you've got to figure out why your horse is leaning.
Yeah.
Would there be any sort of giveaway things that somebody could try and work out, you know, like, I don't know.
Well, it can be a balance issue. you know, so if the horse, depending on, so this is what you take into consideration: the horse's level of training, how old it is, the conformation, the rider's level of training. So these are all the things that you would take into consideration for why the horse is leaning. Has it been uncomfortable in the mouthpiece that it's been in previously? Is the bridle fitting correctly? So there's lots of different things that you would consider, and then you're in a position to make a suggestion. You know, so it's not just a broad spectrum thing. If your horse is leaning, this is what I would use. You know, it's trying to understand why that's happening.
Brilliant. So shall I go with the next question?
Go on. Yeah.
I'm trying to locate DC Morgan because it doesn't mean anything to nearly anyone. But it happened to be the bit that Lissa found worked for Holyfield literally just before Badminton. She didn't know what to ride him in. She could get 7 or 8 minutes in a Waterford gag or whatever gag she used, but she couldn't get any more. And we spoke to our friend in New Zealand who's Mr. Bomber's niece, and she said try these two and sent 2 over, and the DC Morgan was, I think, the one that worked with a lip strap and with 2 reins. With that, have I got it right? Yeah, I was just texting Lissa to say, have we got it here? Because I think it would interest people to see it. But but you keep going with that next question, Rachel.
So 20 people want to know this. Do you like the Micklem bridle? Because I know you're a bridle fitter as well.
Yeah.
Make that 21. I want to know that too.
Again, it's a really individual one, because I did personally use them for quite a long time. I think they work incredibly well for some horses. With a horse that I bred, a mare that I bred that was incredibly sensitive, and the day I put a Micklem on her, it just absolutely transformed her. And it's to do with the pressure points, but for some horses they don't make any difference whatsoever. You know, so it is a bit of a suck it and see. So other than that, you know, certainly I wouldn't say to somebody go out and buy one, it's going to work. But for the horses that they work on with, the fab.
Yeah,
I've absolutely concur with that. I've tried it on 4 horses and it's made no difference to any one of them.
Yeah,
but some people absolutely swear by it, and I so agree with you. And it's almost that you'd say that about any. I always say don't buy anything, borrow, because if you buy it,
absolutely,
something pounds, and you say to the horse, you've got to go in this, I've just spent all my money on it, and he doesn't like it. So
I would
a little bit the same with the bridle.
And there are places that you can hire them now, so I would definitely recommend that to somebody first. I think that sometimes they don't quite support the face enough. That sounds a strange one, but I've got a friend actually. She may be watching tonight. Her horse, she did recently try him in a standard bridle, and he was not happy at all. And he's been ridden all his life in a Micklem, but yet he'll go in a double bridle. So, you know, this is horses for you. You know, it's very difficult.
Fascinating. Yeah. Well, William Micklem, after whom it is named, who's been a friend of mine, was actually my groom when I didn't have a groom, and I went to the European Championships in Kiev before any of you lot were born, 1973, Russia, and he came as a great mate as my groom, and it was one hell of an experience. I can tell you, European Championships in communist Russia, and he has developed into a really fantastic horseman, lives in Ireland now, and he made this bit on a skull, using the skull of a horse to work out where its sensitive bones were, where the holes in its skull were, and came up with this, which is so fascinating. Like every wonderful experiment that works in our world, there's always some horses that say, "Don't do it for me."
The key time that I've used it predominantly are for horses that have what we call a really short smile. And if they have very little room between the premolar and the canine, a Micklem bridle, you can actually fit it onto the head and then adjust the bit separately. That sounds really odd, but if you don't have a lot of room between the canine and the premolar, and you've got to try and microscopically adjust the bit up, what you can find with people trying to lift the bit away from the canine teeth, you actually load the cheeks with a lot of pressure. So a Micklin bridle allows you to fit the bridle on and then adjust the bit separately without adding quite so much pressure to the cheeks or the poll. So that I have found that's been quite useful for horses that are tricky like that.
That's really, really interesting. That sort of gets us a bit nearer why it works for some and not so.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Right. So Tracy Patient has asked this question, and 21 people would like to know the answer. Well, not the answer, but to hear what you have to say, because it's not really a question. Would you mind, so I suppose it is a question, talking us through the Neue Schule? Is that how you say it, Neue Schule?
It's Neue Schule.
Neue Schule. Right, so
yeah,
that completely wrong. I always say New Schule, but Neue Schule, mouthpieces. So could you talk them through the mouthpieces of the Neue Schule?
Right, so there are several mouthpieces. There are the newer released mouthpieces, which are, I should have got some bits in, shouldn't I? But they're in my car outside. So the two most recent, which are the Turtle Top and the Turtle Tactio, which are very good bits. We have, so I'll try and tell you briefly about the different ones. So the turtle bits were basically designed, I mean, amazingly engineered, but they were designed to fit slightly further back in the mouth. So for horses that have got what we call a short smile, that is from the corner of the mouth to the end of the lips. And it reduces the amount of bit room that you've got. They are engineered to try and get away from using the French link, which the FEI are discussing banning. Yeah, so as the mouthpiece rotates, from my point of view, you know, they are a bit of an instrument of torture, but the Turtle Top sits beautifully across the tongue and the membranes and the lips. For the horses that it works well with, from a flat work point of view, you see a lot more lift through the shoulders, and a softer neck and a reaching more forward to the contact. The Turtle Tactio tends to apply more central tongue pressure, and is designed to relieve pressure on the fleshy horse's lips and bars. I find that quite a specific bit fit, because the majority of horses tend to be more tongue sensitive, so the Tactio would apply more pressure there. So there is a more select horses that would be happy in that. They have the starter, which has got some shape to it, a small lozenge, but there is some pressure from the central links on the lozenge that will apply pressure to the tongue, but it doesn't collapse and squash quite as much. So any bit with a central lozenge, when you take the rein pressure up, will, see my hands here, collapse a little bit and put pressure around the jaw. So horses that are very shallow in the chin and the jaw, they tend to not be quite as happy in that collapsing pressure. So that's your starter bit. The Verbinden, which everybody realizes are more angular of the two bits in that shape, that is designed to try and lift a horse through the shoulders, a horse that leans and tends to be a bit more downhill, and that does work quite well to lift them. Me personally think it applies a lot of squashing pressure, so there's a lot of pressure which can apply pressure to the teeth and the cheeks into the teeth, so you've got to be very careful how you fit that. The Transangled Lozenge is the standard lozenge bit that everybody knows and uses, and that can work really well. I've used that quite well for horses that have had some difficulty with fleshiness, but that does apply some tongue pressure as well as the mouthpiece rotates. So that the turtles, the difference with those is that they don't rotate under rein contact, where the other mouthpieces do. So they do tend to give a very consistent contact, whether you take the contact up or not.
Can I ask why you feel a French link, which is more of a plate like that, isn't it, rather than a round one? Why you think it's an instrument of torture?
Because it rotates, and so it sits like that across the tongue. And it's not just that, it's that most of them are too wide. So now as the breeding has changed, there's one of my photographs that Rachel's got. It's not actually from a French link, but I have seen tongue damage. So from tight nose bands and French links, you can see some tongue scarring.
I'll dig it out while you're talking.
Yeah.
So just and it'll pop up.
So it's not just about the plate and about how the plate sits, but it's how big they are. And most horses have got a lower jaw between 2 and 4 centimetres, and most standard lozenges are about 4.5. So it's spreading the pressure of the link further across the bars and the lips. There is actually a photograph as well from a French link on a tongue. Rachel, I think you've got that one as well. Yeah, so Rachel will be able to show you the damage that a French link has caused. There you go. So, and that tends to be from what we call a dog bone French link. So that has got the shape to the center plate. There you go. So that's the damage that has been seen from a French link.
And what's the scar underneath at the bottom? Is that part of the action?
Yeah, these two here, that's from either end of the loop on the link.
Oh.
I need to have some bits another time and be able to demonstrate.
Have you finished showing that? Because I'd like to go to a bit here, which I want to show you when we've got a big screen.
Yeah.
So we take the French link away if we could, Rachel.
Just a second, just working it out. Thank goodness.
Don't worry. Because I don't know whether anybody can see. That's a bomber Kimblewick.
Forward more, a little more forward.
Hang on.
I can probably find one on the internet to show people, and I'll do a bit.
I can send you this. It's interesting because it's
there.
That's better.
There you go.
It's called a happy tongue because this was what Alyssa's horse went round Badminton in when it didn't go more than 8 minutes without running through a gag. And she had 2 reins on it, and she had a leather strap behind, and you can see the high cheeks. So it has a bit of leverage. But the actual mouthpiece, it's called a bomber happy tongue Kimblewick.
That has been
we're just talking about the role, the link on the tongue. Well, this is just an interesting thing going the opposite end. This is taking the tongue pressure away altogether, and that was
absolutely. And so that isn't actually the DC Morgan. We'll have to show
it isn't. It's called the bomber happy tongue Kimblewick, and I got it wrong. The message from Lissa came back saying no, it was not it was this, and she
thank you for that.
Just interesting to go to this after we've talked about the turtles with their links doing one thing or another. Okay. Any more questions, Rachel?
We've got so many, so we're definitely not going to get to them, guys. I'm really sorry, but I think there's definitely an appetite for another webinar. So Kim Hardy, this is actually quite an interesting question. I'd like to know the answer to this. My horse is going really well in the Waterford full cheek snaffle that Lucinda chose for him at the clinic at Richmond Equestrian Centre. That was at the end of last year. Is there a dressage legal bit that would give similar effect for the dressage phase? Thank you.
No.
Sorry, Kim.
In a word, no, I'm sorry. No, so, but I'm sure we could get you something that would work. But yeah, unfortunately, I've had so many people say that to me. But and I actually years ago had a similar thing with this tricky mare that I bred, and she went really well in the Waterford. But there should be something else out there to make your horse comfortable enough on the flat. I tend to think unless you can usually get a good result unless there's something underlying. So that's when we can't, if there is something underlying, whether it's tack related, physical, teeth related, then sometimes it can be trickier to try and get a resolution. But yes, unfortunately, the answer to that question was no.
No. Well, that's good. Well, I think Richmond is in Yorkshire, which is not far.
Yeah.
But you're in Yorkshire, so you can always get in touch, Kim. Okay, so Gabby,
can I just quickly say something about why I think the Waterford, and in my experience, which is not the same as Louise's, I think the Waterfords work because they don't have the nutcracker action.
Definitely.
Liz Chamberlain further down in the questions has said, why don't you like, or why do you like, I can't remember what she said now, a single break. Or a single break gives a nutcracker action, doesn't it? And the Waterford wipes out any nutcracker action. It's just like a sort of chain. And how do you replicate that in legal dressage? Good point.
Absolutely. And I would say with the Waterfords, what you have to watch is the quality of them. So sometimes with the very inexpensive ones, it can be the design near the lip, so where the links are, so you can get some trapping. The Neue Schule do a lovely one with a lip shelf, so there's some space for the lip, so that you don't get that trapping in the lip. Yeah, but absolutely, the Waterfords do work really well in reducing that pressure. The single joint, now this is what I see a lot of, is when they are very shallow and very if they taper away in the chin, the single joint or even the double joint can just create far too much pressure, and that is where you'll get the hollowing. So this is where I would use something like the bomber or something like that tends to give them less of that pressure.
Yeah, but the bomber is a hard one because there's 3,000 bomber bits, so you have to find one of those 3,000.
Absolutely, they are endless, and the wonderful thing for bomber for me is that I have to ask them to make me all sorts of lovely strange things, and they are very good at making things for me. So yeah, but I agree, they are quite tricky. They are quite tricky to get the cheeks right. So getting the mouthpiece right is one thing, and then getting the cheeks right is the next step.
Liz asked why can you elaborate on why you don't usually suggest single joint bits? Did you say that, or did I say that? Because I don't not suggest single joint bits really work for some horses.
Yeah, I absolutely
don't usually suggest them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't generally fit them very much. I did do a horse this week actually, that out of all the bits that the owner had tried, a chunky single joint worked the best for her. But then we did find something better. But that was because it was chunky. It was it had a very narrow little jaw. They had some abnormality in the top jaw. And that's why she'd struggled up until that point. But we did find something that the horse was more comfortable in.
What was it?
It was a Trust synthetic mouthpiece. So it's synthetic, but it's got a forward port on it. So it's still giving some tongue relief as well.
Is synthetic white hard plastic?
This has got some flex to it. So there is some bend to it.
Still white hard plastic.
Yeah, so the rubber tends to be very drying and can drag the skin, and that's why they're not as comfortable in the rubber or some of the synthetics. But the Trust, they are quite a nice, warm, lightweight mouthpiece to use.
Now it's 8 o'clock. So honestly, we could be here all night. Can I ask you, Louise, there's quite a few other questions and we're not going to get through all of them. Might we be able to just answer a few later on, sort of post chat. Would you mind doing that, guys?
No, that's fine.
We'll be here until midnight if we answer all the questions, and I wish we could. So should we just ask one more? Because I'm quite interested to know the answer to Gabby Hernandez's question. Lucinda, have you seen that one?
No, but I am also doing what you're doing and looking at all of them, thinking, golly, I so identify with so many of these questions. I understand why people want it. We really need to have a session that we maybe break these questions up and say, right, X night, we're going to do these questions, Y night, we're going to do those. But I don't know how best to do it. We haven't been faced with quite so many questions before. So as usual, we're on the hoof trying to work out the best thing. I mean, we try to keep these things to an hour because we feel people attention span, supper, long day have had. So let's go for one more question and then we'll work out what we're going to do with all the others because they're interesting.
Well, Gabby Hernandez, she asked, is it good news if a horse foams at the lips a fair bit when ridden, or does it mean the bit prevents it to swallow properly?
It used to be back in the day, we were encouraged, we wanted to see a moist mouth, plenty of saliva, but the sort of ethos has changed a little bit now. So what we would like to do, there are 3 salivary glands in the mouth, so that there tends to be, if you have a lot of saliva, it can be that there is too much pressure somewhere in the mouth, and you're absolutely right there that if there is too much, it could make a difference with the swallowing. They don't breathe and swallow at the same time. We want to see the mouth to be very quiet. We've not touched on the hyoid, have we? We were going to touch on the hyoid as well, about the tongue activity. I think that's going to be another session, isn't it? Yeah, so we want to see some moisture, possibly just some moisture on the lip, but that's it. We would like a quiet mouth with the tongue in the bottom of the mouth. If you're seeing excess saliva, that says that there is too much pressure somewhere. So that's what I would say if I, faced with a horse at a consultation.
So I'm going to ask you a question then, because I've always loved it when my horse has white froth in his mouth, and usually the feeling I have in my hand is what I want. But I'm thinking, I might be misunderstanding what you're saying. I'm thinking you're saying that if I've got white froth, it's not a good thing. There's some pressure somewhere I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
That I don't understand, because it's usually a very good feeling when I have that froth.
Okay.
So that one, my jury will stay happily out of. I love
You're
it.
the expert, Lucinda.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I love it when something comes up with something different.
Every horse is different, aren't they? Every
100%.
horse is different. So you cannot say this is how it should be. Every horse is different. But I've seen literally some horses that leave a trail around the school of saliva. And we don't want to see that. And you don't want the mouth to be so busy that there is lots of saliva.
I've never thought of that's given me a completely different angle to look at it at. I'd be happily following that trail of saliva. Golly, what bit's that horse got? So there you are. You see, you never stop learning, and I shall be intrigued to.
And I'd be thinking, no, we don't want to see that. I need to get that horse out of whatever it is.
Just whizzing down whilst you were answering that question. There are a lot of questions, but the first thing I'd say to everybody, if there's an awful lot of places where you can spend a great deal of money in this game, and we all know that. But no foot, no horse, no mouth, no horse.
Absolutely.
You want to make sure that your horse is okay before you get into a conversation with Louise, because she will tell you about the chip from the wolf tooth, which I'll ask you to tell us in a minute. There's so many things that a good dentist, and there are now masses of good dentists that vets recommend rather than saying don't have him. A good dentist should be able to make sure that the horse has got a sporting chance, that he hasn't got a broken bar from a racing injury or
absolutely
whatever. Before you come to asking all these questions, would you agree, Louise?
I always say to people, please have your horse have the dentist done before I come. Make sure if your saddle's going to be checked, have that done, your physio out. So let's have everything box ticked, and then I can come, because I don't want anything to disguise what I see. So, you know, teeth is but absolutely crucial. And as you were saying, I mean, I did laugh with Rachel earlier saying about having the electrician in the family or the decorator, and your house is the one house that's not had anything done. My own horse or my son's horse has always been very tricky, and part of the reason why I do this job. And I was having real issues with him last year. Well, the year before I had an accident a year ago, but and I thought I must have a look in his mouth, and I thought he'd actually fractured a tooth initially. Oh, that's the wrong one, but not that's actually bone fragments. But these are things that we do find. This is another picture showing.
Sorry, everybody.
Right, here we go. This is a picture of my son's Andalusian, and on the left picture is showing you his lower premolar, and the little tooth that you see at the front is actually a fragment of a wolf tooth that was removed 3 years previously by my dentist, who I've been more than happy with. But when I put my finger in there, this is what I found. And this is what was removed on the right hand side. And he'd actually had 4 wolf teeth, which they were quite large wolf teeth, and they were really well established in his jaw. So he had this one in the lower jaw. Then when the dentist came back, he found that he'd got one in the upper jaw as well, which was under the skin. So the poor horse, I felt so guilty that I'd not been examining him on a regular basis to find out what was the cause of the issue. But these are the things that you can find, and had been causing him a lot of discomfort. Guilty owner. Felt so terrible.
Such a good description there. Your other half's an electrician, and your house is electric wires are falling down.
Yeah.
You're so busy helping everybody else, and you forget.
Absolutely. I felt so guilty. I thought, oh no, my friend would say, Louise, that's terrible. But yes, poor horse. But so these are the things that you may have your dentist every 6 months, but you may have something coming up as a surprise that you know you're not experiencing. Or you're not aware of, that can cause you a big problem.
And you said that the wolf tooth had apparently been taken out 3 years before.
Yes, yeah.
And 3 years later, this little chip
worked its way up. Absolutely. And I say it had one doing the same at the top, at the other side. But yeah.
So Rachel, you and I are going to find out a way of how to handle the other 50 questions, because we really want you to get them answered, because we know how frustrating it is when you've got this, you're interested.
Absolutely.
Louise here, and you can't get your things answered because we don't want to go too much over the hour. So we'll work out something, won't we, Rachel? And we'll chuck it up on the.
Yeah. What we'll do, everybody, I think there's definitely an appetite for this subject. There's no doubt. And we did talk, I have spoken to Louise, and she's going to be a guest in the Academy regularly for us, because this isn't, this is a never-ending subject. But equally, I don't see why we can't do some webinars out, some more webinars throughout the year, if you're happy to do that, Louise. And Lucinda, I know you are. You could talk about bitting until the cows come home. So as could I. So as far as all the other questions are concerned, I'm going to my technical whiz here. We can still see them after the webinar, right? So we're not going to lose the questions. So I'm going to give Louise a nice bit of homework.
Excellent. I apologise to everybody that I knew we would have loads of questions, and I'm so sorry that we've not got to everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will try to.
Yeah, we'll get back to you about those, and also and perhaps probably some of them will post on in the community. Because not everybody will see the answers, because a lot of people were interested in them. So we'll find a way, guys. We'll find a way. And before you go, we just wanted to have a quick chat about Lucinda's Cross Country Academy that we've been doing now for 4 months, I think, Lucinda. I convinced Lucinda, I just know how amazing she is, and I wanted to find a way to get her to as many people as possible. And this is how we, this is the plan that we came up with. And it's been so much fun, hasn't it, Lucinda?
We've had a wonderful fun time, and I just thought of a brilliant answer, that if everybody who's asked a question joins the Academy, then we will answer it on the Academy. Now, how's that for blackmail?
I like that.
I know.
Oh, dear. Quite a few of them, actually. I noticed quite a few of the names are already on the Academy. So
Yeah.
Anyhow, we'll get it sorted. We'll get your answers to you somehow.
Yeah, we will get your answers. And obviously, we'd love you to join us in the Academy. And just a little quick rundown about what happens. Well, actually, on Friday, and I'll send an email to everybody after this telling them we're going to do some live casts. And it's going to be Lucinda talking to some of our Academy members about their experience, because I think until you really hear what people are, their experiences, then it's hard to understand. But basically, it's an online membership. Each month you get 4 deliverables, I call them, but that's a dreadful word really. But the first week we do a video learning, and this month, February, was so brilliant. I loved our video. It was called the 3 Fs, and they're not the bad Fs. They're good Fs. And that was brilliant, and we've just released that. And then next week, Lucinda's talking to Laura Collett, who won Poe, and she's an amazing lady. And I know before I took over Tweezledown, I ran an event. She had a horrendous fall at Tweezledown, and she has come back from that fall near death. It was horrendous. She's come back from the brink and is one of the 4, how many 5 stars in the world?
So the only 5-star in 2020, wasn't it?
The only one. Not
she came of age. She's been knocking at the door for a very long time, and she came of age in no uncertain way. Her cross country was quite amazing.
Yeah. So Lucinda's going to be chatting to her just in the Academy. And then the third weekend, the third Monday, we always do a live. And now we've got this new system, which we're using today. We're going to use it for the live, which is so good because we can play video, which we've never been able to do before. So I'm really excited. I haven't actually told you about that yet, Lucinda. So
I'm getting it.
Yeah. So that's actually going to bring another dimension to the lives. And that's where you can ask Lucinda questions. And it's so, like, literally you are there on the screen with us. It's really, really fun.
I think as we get bigger, are we not going to try and get that system where the questions get, the most asked question gets on top, and the next most asked question, there's a system that can do that for us. I think it's called Village Hall or something like that. But anyhow, it's a bit technical for me, but we'll get something worked out. The more people that come on, the more questions will be asked.
Generally, what we do find on those lives is that we end up having like the same questions come up time and time again. So usually you've got about 10 questions following that following the video learning. So it does work really well. And if we have lots of people, it's usually the same thing. It's sort of 10 questions, and Lucinda will run through them all. And then the last Monday we do Mindset Monday, or Mental Monday, as Lucinda likes to talk. So getting into the mind of either the horse or the rider. This month it's the horse, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
we've got the most amazing, remarkable man called Andrew McLean from Australia, who is a really, really good horseman. And I thought it would be fun to get away from our minds into the horses' minds for this month.
I'm really looking forward to that one. That's going to be really interesting. So anyway, as a little incentive, guys, for you to sign up, we've got an early bird bonus for those of you that sign up before tomorrow. I'm going to send an email with the link, and that bonus is an amazing talk that Lucinda did with Chris Bartle, who is the England team coach for the eventing discipline. And he also was the coach for Germany. He brought Germany into the gold medal machine that they are now. So now he's hopefully doing the same thing for England. So that is going to come out on an email, or you can visit the website, which is Lucinda Green Cross Country Academy. Anyway, sales pitch over. Sales pitch over.
You see why Rachel's got to be here. A, she's a techo. B, she's a saleswoman. I'm absolutely useless when I try and sell anything.
The thing is, though, one thing I don't have, I have trouble selling things, some things, but not things I believe in. And Lucinda is just phenomenal. And I can say that, and Lucinda can't. She's always really nice about me, and I get really embarrassed. So I can see you're actually going red, Lucinda. You actually are going red. But my mission in life now is to get Lucinda to as many people as possible, so we can really, really just help our horses by being better. Right. Well, it's like having a better relationship with our horses, so that you can ride safely cross country. And there we go. Anyway, Louise.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
No, welcome. I hope that's been all right. And if anybody wants to contact me at Bit to Perfection, any questions, more than welcome. So
I'm going to send an email with all of those details. It's going to be coming out shortly, just tonight. So we're going to type it up furiously and send it out to everybody. And then if you want to watch it again, it's going to be on the replay on the website, www.lucindagreencrosscountry or xcacademy.com. But that'll be on the email too. Fabulous.
Great. Louise, thank you for your time. Really appreciate
it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope it hasn't been too long.
No, it's been brilliant. And do you know how many people we had on? Over 350 people.
No.
Yeah.
I'm glad, Louise, I'm glad you and I didn't know. We'd have been really embarrassed.
I know. I've been terrified.
We're used to having about 40, 50, 60, and we get very matey with everybody. Yeah. That's exciting. Rachel, well handled. Well done with this new system. Fantastic.
Oh, well.
And Simon, if you're there from Zebra Products, Amerigo Saddles, thank you for joining us. And we're very soon going to be doing something on saddles, because it's such a fascinating area.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So goodbye, everybody. And thank you, Louise. And thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.